would like to welcome you to our session here, Poverty, Power, and the People Behind the Numbers, Stories and Policy Recommendations from the Experts on Poverty here in Results. So as we join in on this conversation, we do ask that if you have any questions, please refrain from interrupting this session with the questions until the end. That way we can be able to get the information out, and then as time goes, we'll be able to have time and room to be able to answer any questions. Thank you. So, for those who are not aware of what Experts on Poverty is here in Results, we have a cohort of individuals who know firsthand with lived experiences of poverty here in the United States. We formed this group about 4 years ago, actually, at an international conference, which I have the distinguished honor of being one of the original individuals and persons to share my story on the platform, and being able to use my story on Capitol Hill, through media and other various outlets to be able to help shape policy and promote the change that we want to see here, not only in Results but across our country and world. So as we are going to dive more into this session, please continue to keep your ears, eyes, and hearts open to our expertise when it comes to being on this panel, just being vulnerable to share our stories. Results has done a wonderful job with shaping the way, the training regarding sharing our stories, understanding the value and importance of just how important stories are to each of us as individuals live with these lived experiences, and understanding the platform that we use to share our stories. And as we ask also that just to be respected of stories, and not only just the experts, but anyone that you come in contact with that would like to open up and share their experience, that you hold a level of respect for those individuals, and knowing that stories are very sacred and that they are owned by that person. So before you do have an opportunity to go to lobby your members of Congress, just keep in mind to ask that individual if they give you the permission to be able to use those stories. Okay, because we own our own stories, and we know that stories are powerful, but we want to be able to be respected in that manner. So thank you again for all that have, came to the session, and I'm going to now pass it over. So, but I would like to welcome Jackie and Yolanda here this afternoon as we go into our session. Thank you both ladies for being here to be able to share your expertise and while we're here. So Jackie, if you don't mind, would you tell us your story, or do you have a story to tell? What would you like to share with us today?
Jackie! So hi everyone, I'm Jackie Halliday. For those of you I have not met, I am also this year the girl on the cover of the annual report, apparently. So I think my story is a little interesting. I'm from New Brunswick, New Jersey, which is a very urban center of New Jersey, Central Jersey, which does exist. And I grew up in poverty without really knowing it until I was much older. As a child, it's really hard to realize that your situation is different than everyone else around you who you're at school with. So it wasn't until I was a preteen and a teenager that I really realized that my circumstances were quite different than my peers. And it was challenging when I had that realization. I grew up on SNAP. I grew up on Medicaid. These are programs that I know well, even though at the time I didn't know what they were. They were just how we got food and how I paid for doctor's bills. So I'll tell you about myself now. I finished Rutgers in 2014 with my bachelor's. And then again, most recently in May with my master's in public policy, also from Rutgers. And that was really influenced by my results. So in 2014, after I finished my undergraduate degree, I had done 2 AmeriCorps terms as an undergraduate, helping with a small food policy council in New Brunswick, helping equitable, sustainable, accessible food in the community. And I was really interested in policy, but I didn't know what that meant. And then I came to my first ISC as a real changer, and I was like, wow, this is it. This is what I'm interested in. And I went back and I applied and I started my master's in public policy. And I feel like it's really important for me to be here because I am, as I often say to people, I am 4'11", I am white, I am blonde, and I also grew up in poverty. And there are a lot of stereotypes around what that looks like, but it also looks like this.
Hello, I'm Yolanda Gordon. I'm from the great state of South Carolina, and growing up as a kid, much like Jackie, I didn't know that I was poor. My family actually had something that many families didn't have. We had an asset. I grew up on 36 acres of land. My grandparents grew all of our vegetables. I didn't know what a grocery store was until I was 14. So we had a great asset, but we were also liquid asset poor. I didn't realize that my parents were on a recon mission when they would feed us, that they would send us to my grandmother's house right next door and my aunt's house across the street because we didn't have food. And I didn't realize that until I became an adult. I became a parent at 19. And at 19 years old, my ex-husband and I were both in the military. My daughter required WIC to eat, and we required food stamps to feed ourselves. Now, mind you, 1998, 1999, U.S. military, my husband and I both, living on a military base, required food stamp benefits to feed ourselves. That was just the beginning as I got out of the military, and I returned home to South Carolina because my marriage was really starting to crumble. I got married at 18, became a parent at 19. And when I came home to South Carolina, I required assistance, even though I lived with family. I had to feed myself, I had to feed my daughter. So we required WIC, SNAP benefits, Medicaid, and I got a $79 a month TANF check. And that was just enough to buy diapers. Just living and existing and kind of navigating, being a parent, living in South Carolina, the long distance relationship, maybe, maybe not. I really began to understand what poverty was. And then with the addition of 2 more children, and then both of my children having special needs, both of my younger children are on the autism spectrum, I couldn't work a normal job. I couldn't work a regular 9 to 5 and make money. I had to find those odd jobs that didn't mind if I had to take a day off to take my child to a specialist or to a therapist, or if my son was having a meltdown that day, I needed to leave to go and pick him up. So I ended up driving a school bus 180 days a year, not getting paid all year. So I got paid during the school year, but not during the summer. And just kind of navigating life as a single parent, a divorced single parent with 3 children, sometimes getting child support, sometimes not getting child support, and figuring everything out. And advocacy has always been in my blood. The first presidential campaign I worked on was Bill Clinton's campaign at the age of 12. So I knew advocacy and I knew what it was, and I began to find a home once I began to figure out what was going on with my children. I had to find something to do with this energy. And 28, 29 years old, being fed up and sick and tired of being sick and tired, I went back to school to start my first degree, which was in political science and economics. Stopped 12 credits shy because I was bored, but still attempted to get my degree. And in 2011, I was working for a nonprofit, and of course in the nonprofit world, sometimes you have funding, sometimes you don't. I decided that I either A, needed to find another job, or I needed to go back to school, and I decided to do both. And in 2015, I graduated with an associate's degree in applied sciences as an occupational therapy assistant. So that, I'm one of those people that I can say I no longer qualify for safety net programs.
Both of my children still receive Medicaid, but because they have disabilities. I make more than a living wage. I bought my house last year with a VA. But at the same time, you know, we have those months that we don't have enough patients, and I do get some work, but it's not full-time work. And, you know, I have to fall back on those lessons that I learned while I was using SNAP benefits. And those lessons actually come in pretty handy, and how to feed my kids and how to give them a meal where they have everything that they need to grow and thrive and survive. And I was also one of the first in the cohort in 2015, and ever since then I have been amazed at the amount of work that we do as experts. I've been involved with results since 2012. I originally came in on the global side and quickly switched to the domestic side because this was where I was at home. This was what I knew, and my story fit better here than it did on the global side. So why do we tell stories? You know, if we don't tell our stories, someone else will. And 9 times out of 10, they will get it wrong. They will have the statistics wrong. They will have what we look like wrong. 9 times out of 10, when you think of someone getting SNAP benefits, you think of me. You don't think of Jackie. And it is also an effective way to influence policy. Again, I live in South Carolina, a very red state, but I also know that when I walk into those offices, they remember who I am because they remember my story. They remember that I have 3 children, which all 3 of my children have a special need. My oldest daughter's bipolar. So there is a constant conversation going on just how it affects families in general. And also, you know, a story is 22 times more likely to be remembered than a stat. I can tell you I cannot remember facts, I cannot remember stats, but I can tell you how it feels to walk into a grocery store with an EBT card and have the cashier look at me like I've done something wrong. And one of the examples that I like to use is 1 in 6 children live in food insecure households. That is 4 children out of my child's 6th grade class, math class, a class of 24 children. And that's 1 child too many. So there is an etiquette for storytelling. First, you do not co-opt someone else's story, period. When we tell our stories, we want to be in a safe space. We want to know that everyone around us is with us, they understand us, they hear our struggles, and they know that we can feel safe telling our story. And no one is judging you on your lived experience. You also have to take into consideration that every individual with lived poverty experience, they're telling their story to affect change. Because again, when you think of poverty, you think of my face, you don't think of Jackie. You don't think of Kimberly, who's sitting down here. You don't think of those 2, you think of me. And Clara. But don't co-opt somebody else's story for your own use. Actually talk to them and make sure that it's okay to share details of their story, or make sure that it's okay to share their story, period. Because sometimes it's very sensitive, and sometimes when we share our stories, we're coming from a place of pain, and sometimes we're coming from a place of shame, that this is a part of our life that we are not proud of. Also, you know, don't tell others how to tell their story. Don't look at them and say, okay, we're talking about SNAP. Now you chime in because you use SNAP as a child, or you use SNAP as an adult. Like, make it flow seamlessly. Have everyone have their own part of your group. Don't treat the person like they're the puppet and you're the puppet master and you're pulling their string and the story's supposed to pop out. Let them naturally feel comfortable sharing their story in that moment. And again, be aware that it is tough to share a challenging moment in life with others. I don't mind sharing my story. because I know that my story can help someone else and the next person and the next person. And know that we've experienced this personally, so we're not just our stories. We are people that know exactly what needs to happen behind those walls, that often we don't have a seat at the table.
Yeah, so I would definitely echo everything Yolanda is saying. It happens all the time, and I don't think we even mean to do it. You know, you're excited that you've met someone who has gotten past that part of their life or is ready to share, and you're so excited to share their story that you kind of don't even realize like that is very personal for them, that they even shared that with you. And that also doesn't mean if you don't like certain parts of their life that it's not part of their story. So for example, I've been in situations, I grew up on SNAP my entire childhood. That was the reality of my situation. My parents always lived in poverty, and they still do. And I've had people say to me, well, politicians don't really like to hear that, so you might want to just talk about 1 or 2 years that you lived on SNAP. And that, you know, like, okay, like, I'm sorry it makes you uncomfortable, but that is the reality of my situation that I'm sharing. And I wrote something this morning at 6 a.m., which is when all good thoughts come, right? So I wanted to make sure that I read it just so I get all of it. And it really complements what Yolanda was saying. Allow others to share their story on their own terms, give them the space to do so, and the respect that they deserve for being brave. But also, do not discredit someone with lived experience for the deep policy knowledge I guarantee you they have. You don't acutely understand programs like SNAP from reading the Farm Bill or the eligibility requirements. You understand the program much more intimately when you're personally crusading the bureaucracy the program brings, and when you spent time and time again in that line at the Department of Human Services, waiting for answers you have no other way to get.
So I love this picture. Yes. So Tavis Smiley was here maybe 2 years ago, and this was something that stuck out to me. It says there are so many highways into poverty, but very few sidewalks out, which makes total sense. So these are the numbers, and you can find these numbers on talkpoverty.org. They actually have really good fact sheets, and I'm just going to leave these here as I kind of talk to you about what these numbers mean. So in looking at statistics, right now 40% of Americans cannot afford a $400 emergency, which makes them payday lenders, high-interest loans as high as 98%, and pawn shops. Also, 42% of Americans will retire broke, meaning that they will have less than $10,000 saved for retirement. And females statistically save less than males. And we always know what that means, because we have children and we have to provide for our children. So how can we improve anti-poverty programs? So the first thing is we definitely have to strengthen SNAP. Right now, SNAP benefits provide $1.40 per person per meal per day. The average household receives $254 a month in benefits. And I used to be that household that received just a little over $300 a month in benefits, with 3 children and myself eating. So we had to be very creative to make sure that they had a balanced meal, that they didn't have a lot of processed foods. And it makes you question, why is it that convenience foods are a lot cheaper than going in and buying a bag of apples? Also, sometimes we have to look at how SNAP does not evolve as the cost of food evolves. SNAP stays kind of in the same place, and even though it does respond to recession, it stays in the same spot. It does not grow to respond to the price of food. SNAP should have streamlined access instead of reducing access by having centralized call centers with limited phone lines. It should reward grocers and farmers for selling and starting businesses in food deserts, and begin measuring food insecurity starting as young as the age of 3. These are the things that are simple that would be the most bang for the taxpayers' dollars.
Yeah, so I think these are definitely some things that can happen. Another thing that we talk about a lot is the Flint Effect. I'm most familiar with SNAP, so I'll keep talking about that. So for a lot of these programs, I don't want to say it disincentivizes work, because it doesn't. It definitely incentivizes work. But you get to a certain point in your working life where you don't want to make too much more, because even if you're $1 over the thresholds for SNAP, you lose those benefits and you're in a worse place than you were before you were making more income. So I think it's important that we really think through, and policy really takes into account that these things are way more fluid than that. It's not you make $1 more and now you are secure and you don't need food anymore. That's not reality. So things like that need to be accounted for. We also have to think about how interconnected all of these policies were. There was a great session before that Kiana was on about two sides of the same coin. You can't think about education without housing, without food security, without all of these things. And I think we always talk about them very much in silos when we need to be talking about it as a conversation of how can we better support this whole system to get people out of poverty for good, like we're talking about here.
And I would like to add as well, just ways to improve, not just the programs itself, but the individual that is the recipient of these programs. I'm more with the holistic approach when it comes to empowering you as a person, when it comes to understanding these programs, for one, are, if there wasn't a need, they wouldn't be in place. Yeah. So that in itself is a great target to even realize and understand that root is it was a need. And so when we get to where now understanding that those who have this need not only face the stigma of being shamed for, situations most often aren't due to our own choices, because understanding poverty and anti-hunger programs that we have in our country are, we just understand the way that policy shapes how these are being executed in our nation. So just knowing that the folks who are recipients of these programs, for one, just understand when you are going to the store or you at work and you have these disadvantages when it comes just to put a meal on the table, being more being able to desensitize the negative impact of what these programs are and the individuals that are receiving them. And ways we can do that is making it a moral obligation to know that everyone should have that opportunity to be able to provide a meal for their families and not feel guilty by however they're getting that done in a way that is needed. So I just wanted to add that to this conversation as well.
So one of the other things that we find in anti-poverty programs is asset limits. So with Medicaid and Social Security benefits, if you have a child with special needs, you cannot have over $2,000 in liquid resources if you are single. If you are married, you can't have over $3,000 in liquid resources. And if you do, you lose your Medicaid or you lose your Social Security benefits. So that's one of the things that that has to change. And Americans, we have a way of getting around that sometimes, but there are a lot of Americans that don't have a way to get around it. One of the things that I'm constantly reminded when I talk to individuals is that, there's this thing called a trust, and you can establish a trust, and you can put money in that trust. You can put the maximum amount for the year in the trust. But the thing is that you have to have an attorney to establish that trust. And if you don't have an attorney to establish that trust and it's not done correctly, then Uncle Sam is going to come back and he's going to tax your money. So if you are a low-income American who has a special needs child, that you're worried about your child outliving you and not wanting your child to go into a group home, you cannot leave your home to your child. You cannot leave your money to your child. Your child cannot have over $2,000. You cannot leave insurance benefits when you die to your child. You have to have a way to secure this for your child. And there's this thing called an ABLE account that was established. Well, the funny thing about that is if you put your home, if you put your money into that ABLE account and your child passes away, you lose everything because it goes over to Medicaid. So that's the catch. So asset limits really cripple Americans, especially those receiving Medicaid benefits, and those receiving Social Security from being able to save, being able to be homeowners, and being able to take part in the American dream that we're all peddled as we grow up. One of the other things that I like to remind individuals is that if you cannot save money, how can you respond to losing your job? Or how can you respond to an emergency? So if you don't have those monies set aside, there's no way to respond to those things. So the next thing is banking. Banking laws, as you can tell, they change, they're fluid, things happen. And right now, banking really preys on low-income Americans. From Bank of America, they used to have a checking account that you did not have to have a daily balance. You did not have to have a direct deposit. Now they have done away with that, and you have to pay $12 to $15 a month just to keep your money in their bank, no matter how little the amount of money that you have. Also, a lot of states are going to debit cards for TANF benefits or for child support benefits. But what people don't realize is that every time you swipe that card, like in my area, Bank of America, they're the people that control those cards. Every time you swipe that card, they charge you 50 cents or $1 for using that card. Every time you go to the ATM, they charge you. Not only does the bank that you're using charge you for using their bank, but they charge you $2 for using the card at an ATM. So now you're already getting very little money, but now you're losing more money paying fees at banks. And so they prey on individuals that live in poverty because they know that they need these things. And now a lot of states are going to, well, I'm sorry that you have to have this child support check, but you either need to have a direct deposit or you need to have our card. And most people don't trust banks, so they opt for the card. So banks also prey on individuals in this manner. So I mean, personally, I feel that there should be a regulation that says that if this is a low-income American that makes less than X amount of dollars a year, you cannot charge them for using your bank. And also, for the states that opt for these cards, they need to pay the fees for those cards if you're not going to cut a paper check. It just makes more sense and it helps families at the end of the day. And the other thing is that I constantly remind Lindsey Graham's office that, I talk to his office a lot, that when we think about banking, they're always talking about shareholders instead of talking about their customers. Right. And we need to start sending the message that if you have no customers, you have no shareholders. And until we start sending that message, until Congress starts sending that message, they're going to continue to have these practices. Education is one of the things that we're all told that is our way out. It's our yellow brick road. We need to get on it and we need to head out of poverty. I personally have $64,000 in student loans. And every time I look at that balance, I get a little disturbed, but then I get angry because why should education in America cost that much? And why should education in America for an in-state institution cost that much? So one of the things that I started to research is that when I was in middle school and high school, we were taught financial literacy. Back during the days of cursive writing and adding and subtracting like normal people. We were taught etiquette and we were taught how to balance a checkbook, how to figure out how much we are paying on interest for an item just by looking at it and doing the math in our head. We were taught these lessons. And unbelievably, there are 20 states that mandate that high school students have economics classes, and only 16 states require them to test for mastery. There are 17 states that require courses in personal finance, but Georgia is the only state that requires that teachers are trained in personal finance if they're going to teach it. So, in states with more rigorous mandates have students that have a better financial start. So why is it that all 50 states are not doing this? Why are we not teaching our kids so that they're not prey to predators out there that are going to tell them as soon as they land in college, you know, you can get a student loan, and you can get a credit card, and you can get this and you can get that, when many of these kids have never had a job, they've never had to manage money, they've never had to deal with the things that adults have to deal with. So I feel like this should be something that's mandated in every school in America. I would say starting in kindergarten, teaching them the value of money all the way up to high school, teaching them that when you get into college, there's this thing called scholarships, and you need to seek out those scholarships before you get a student loan. Wages are, as we know, minimum wage is a little over $7. Back in the early 2000s, when I worked as a CNA, which is back-breaking work, I worked for $7.25 an hour. Now, luckily, their CNAs are making $12 an hour, but many of them rely on SNAP benefits just to get by. They rely on Medicaid. In my state of South Carolina, you would have to make $15.83 to afford a two-bedroom home. The average to afford a two-bedroom home in America is $21.21, and that's 3 times the amount of federal minimum wage. So people wonder why we're not buying houses. They wonder why individuals that work at Burger King or work at McDonald's are not able to get out of poverty. It's because wages are not keeping pace with housing and all the necessities that we need just to survive. And I totally agree with minimum wage being raised to $15. I personally think it should be more, just so people can afford to live and to have money left over to save and to just have a cushion. So millennials, I have one of you, and I'm constantly talking to my 18-year-old about the ride that you guys are on. You guys honestly have been set up to fail. And I speaking as a 38-year-old, you guys have honestly been set up to fail. A lot of the decisions that were made before some of you were born are setting you up to fail. Looking at the numbers, the Council for Economic Education says that, actually it's Forbes. Forbes just had this article in January that said that student loan debt this year will hit $1.5 trillion, which is 2 times more than what it was a decade earlier. Forbes also reports that 12.8% of millennials are unemployed compared to the national average of 4.9%. They're being forced into lower jobs, with many jobs now asking for a bachelor's degree just to make $24,000 to $28,000 a year. The Council for Economic Advisors, the Executive Office of the President of the United States, says that the pace of household formation is low among millennials, and the number of millennials that are heads of household has fallen. There are very few millennial renters and homeowners, and it is less likely that young adults will become homeowners than previous generations. This generation also, we all know that you guys witnessed the Great Recession and the housing bubble. So a lot of millennials are feeling the hit from the Great Recession and the housing bubble, even though many of you were in middle school or in high school. According to the Millennial Report, 6% of you feel like you're making a lot more than required to cover basic needs, when only 3% of female millennials feel that they're making more than enough to cover basic needs. 63% of millennials would have difficulty covering an unexpected expense of $500. And many live with their parents because the cost of housing, student loan debt, and low wages prevent them from living on their own, and if they do live on their own, they do have to have a roommate. 44% of millennials would also dedicate $5,000 in lottery winnings to pay bills and loans, signaling a struggle to launch, save, and invest in the future. This next statistic kind of blows my mind. Millennials are not becoming entrepreneurs, which if there are no entrepreneurs, there are no new jobs. So 2% of millennials reported that they are self-employed, compared to my generation, which was 7.6%. 8.3% for baby boomers. And the Kauffman Foundation implies that millennials aged 20 to 34 represent about 23% of new entrepreneurs in 2013, which is down from 35% back in 1996. Again, fewer entrepreneurs mean fewer new jobs. So we were asked what we would share with our offices on Tuesday, which they already know what I'm going to share because I share it every month. But I feel that in order for us to get back on track and to get the American dream back on track, because right now, to me, the American dream that I know from a kid is a pipe dream. It doesn't exist anymore. I feel that, number one, for low-income Americans, we have to increase funding to SNAP. We have to make sure that the House Farm Bill doesn't basically go into effect. The Senate version is a whole lot better. But we also have to make sure that they understand that there are people like us that are going to still be in their face all the time telling them that SNAP is important. I was reading on my phone before I came in here that the White House plans to make an announcement next week that guess what? Poverty is over and it no longer exists. So this is why we are important, because poverty is not over and it still exists. So we've got to focus on securing SNAP. We have to focus on making sure that SNAP is expanded, that doors are open to more people that need it, instead of closing the doors on people that need it. And also that, you know, a lot of these things that we talk about, employment, cost of education, we need to look at those things. We need to look at the cost of housing, because I live in a nice neighborhood. We're the bedroom community of Charlotte, North Carolina. I have NFL players that live in my area. And to rent a house in my area is anywhere from $1,500 to $3,000 a month. Average Americans cannot afford $1,500 to $3,000 a month. And these are houses that are smaller than mine. I live in a 3,000 square foot home. It has never been updated since it was built. But houses that are 1,500 square foot, has a little bit of marble, they're going for $300,000 to $400,000 just to, so the cost of housing is extreme. And it's just not in my area, it's happening all over America.
So unfortunately, I won't be here on Tuesday, but I will share what I share every year, is I go and I tell my representatives, I am a first generation high school, college, and now master's graduate, and I grew up on SNAP, and there are so many children like me, and we can't let them down. There are so many kids right now who are on those programs, and they don't even know it, and it's not up to them what is happening in their lives right now. But without that, I don't know what my life would be like, and I am eternally grateful, and I can't see that be taken away from people who need it.
I just have one more thing to add. I have a lot of things to add. So as we look at the opioid crisis and all the other crises that we find out are national health crisis just in the United States, food insecurity needs to be a national health crisis. We can talk about food insecurity, we can talk about SNAP, but when we look at the core of it and look at how it affects children, how it affects adults, how it affects older adults, because as you get older, food insecurity doesn't go away. It affects your entire body and how you can react to a fall or to a number of other things. If you're food insecure as a child, your chances of having diabetes, having brittle bones, not being able to heal from a fall increases dramatically. So food insecurity needs to be a national health crisis, and Congress needs to understand that even though, you know, this White House is going to announce that poverty is over, it's not over. And it's in your face, and it's on your street corners, and it's in your neighborhoods, it's in your towns, and as long as, you know, minimum wage stays where it's at, as long as SNAP benefits stay as low as they are, as long as TANF is a block grant, it is going to continue, and it's not going to get any better.
Shonda and Jackie both, just for sharing their stories, and then the in-depth research and information that we received on today, which I find even more helpful to just my journey in advocacy. And even though I can understand different things that are happening just in my own community, being able to be reminded of why we're doing these things, and being able to get this information is much valuable. So thank you, ladies.